In this video, I'll share with you several gameplay captures recorded in very high quality, and everything has been captured directly from a NeoGeo. The NeoGeo was a 4th generation console, but it didn't directly compete against the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. It was way more expensive than them, both in terms of hardware as well as games. To give you an idea, the home version of the NeoGeo was released in the early 90s and cost $650, which, considering inflation, is almost $1,500 nowadays. And the games cost upwards of $200, which, adjusting for inflation, corresponds to around $450 nowadays. Super expensive. The NeoGeo had 3 main models. The NeoGeo MVS was the first one released. MVS stands for Multi-Video System, and this model was made to be used in the arcades. SNK's idea regarding the MVS was really smart. Instead of using customized boards for arcades, SNK made the NeoGeo MVS, which used cartridges, so arcade owners didn't need to worry about updating their cabinets. They just needed to buy a new cartridge for their MVS and replace the older cartridge inside the cabinet, also replace the artwork surrounding the cabinet, and that was it. The NeoGeo MVS made the arcade operation much easier and also less expensive. The following NeoGeo model released was the AES. AES stands for Advanced Entertainment System, which initially was supposed to be a rental-only console, but later became available for purchase at those absurd prices I mentioned earlier. The AES also used cartridges, but those cartridges are in a different format than the MVS cartridges. You can actually use NeoGeo MVS cartridges on the AES model, but that requires an adapter. SNK also released the NeoGeo CD, aiming to provide a more accessible NeoGeo model, but it was still very expensive, costing around $400 at the time. That was in the mid-90s, and today that would be around $800. At least the games were much cheaper, starting at $50, which in today's money would be around $100. And it's surreal to think that even the low-cost version of the NeoGeo was still unattainable, unreachable for most people. And it's also important for me to mention that the NeoGeo CD had significantly lower performance than the AES and MVS models because the loading times were extremely slow. The NeoGeo that I have here is a Consolized NeoGeo that GamesCare built for me. So I take this moment to thank GamesCare because it's because of them that I'm able to produce this video. Regarding this NeoGeo, it's basically an arcade board adapted to have traditional video output instead of the arcade standard. And also it has inputs for traditional NeoGeo controllers, and it's in a case that gives it a console appearance instead of looking like just an arcade board. And here's an MVS cartridge. Notice how the MVS carts are much larger than any other carts basically. The connector, besides having way more pins than normal, has a double connection. One side handles audio and the other side handles video. And regarding my NeoGeo cartridge collection, I have to thank GamesCare again because they gave me a few carts. And also I need to thank a Brazilian store called Casa do Videogame, which means video game house in English. They got me a lot of carts as a gift, and nowadays it's super hard, super expensive to find NeoGeo cartridges, so both GamesCare and Casa do Videogame really helped me make this video. A challenge with many of the NeoGeo MVS carts that are in the market is that they are very poorly taken care of. Many arcades were environments, and how could I say that? Environments that were septic, not very hygienic, so in general, MVS carts need care. Need cleaning before use. For the connectors, I clean them with cotton swab moistened with 99% isopropyl alcohol, and usually that's enough. Some of the games I'll demonstrate for you I captured with original SNK cartridges, and for other games I used a well-known cartridge among NeoGeo collectors, the 161 in 1 cart, and it's a cart that claims to have 161 games, which is quite interesting because there are not 161 officially licensed games for the NeoGeo. So in reality, the cart has about 100 games and the rest are filler hacked versions of games. And regarding the 161-in-1 cart, recently the NeoGeo community has been reverse engineering it, so eventually we should see the release of a cart or 2 carts with a complete NeoGeo library, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. I really hope that this project succeeds because, as I said, collecting NeoGeo nowadays is unfeasible due to the insane prices. Availability as well has become a problem, and even the NeoGeo flashcards are super expensive. There are 2 brands making flashcards for the NeoGeo, Terra Onion and Darksoft, and their NeoGeo flashcards cost more than $500. For the gameplay captures in this video, I've used the following equipment. My Consolized NeoGeo MVS from GamesCare, which I've already introduced to you, a SCART cable also from GamesCare, a RetroTink 4K to convert the SCART signal to HDMI, and a capture card from AverMedia model GC573. The gameplay captures were all done in 4K at 60 FPS, and I recommend you watch the video in this resolution so you get the best possible quality on YouTube. YouTube allocates a better codec and higher bitrate for 4K content, so that's why it's better to watch in 4K. What you see in this video are pure, clean, crisp pixels. The video quality of the Consolized MVS from GamesCare is impressive. It looks like an emulator, it looks like digital signal, you will see, but I have a reminder for you. During the NeoGeo era, displays were CRT, and CRT displays blend adjacent pixels, and that creates the sensation of more resolution and more colors, so keep that in mind. And one final note before I start showing the games, many people associate the NeoGeo with fighting games, and of course the NeoGeo had a lot of great fighting games, but in this video I'll also show you a lot of games that are not fighting games and that are brilliant. So now finally, let's begin.
Metal Slug!
I felt I had to start the video with this one. This is an amazing classic, Metal Slug. This game features beautiful sprites and an amazing variety of scenarios. It does have slowdowns, even though the NeoGeo was very powerful. The game has slowdowns, and that's because the gameplay can get very hectic with so many enemies, so many vehicles, and so many projectiles on the screen. And this game is lots of fun. I highly recommend it, especially because you can beat it in less than an hour.
Heavy machine gun!
And now the Metal Slug that most people consider the very best one. This is Metal Slug 3. But not like this. Okay, this is better. This is a huge evolution when compared to the first game in the franchise. Metal Slug 3 has more characters, more enemies, new vehicles. Some truly crazy settings, aquatic stages, and this game is lots of fun.
Okay!
Now a game that surprised me, this is Ninja Masters, which was clearly glitching initially, but after a cleanup, it ran normally. I'm honestly not very familiar with this game, but I found it quite beautiful and fun, although the gameplay wasn't as polished as some other games are. One aspect that caught my attention was the intro music. Wonderful. It really sets a strong tone for the game. Now a fighting game that I confess that I didn't know until I got the cart for this video. This is Savage Rain. It has a system of more than one plane in the scenario in which you can fight. And it has a pretty cool map when you're accessing the stages. Visually, the game is quite beautiful. But gameplay-wise, I didn't find it very polished.
Winner!
Another fighting game, and this one is from a very famous franchise. This is Double Dragon, but this is not a beat 'em up, it's a fighting game. And I feel like it would have been a better choice to make a beat 'em up based on Double Dragon instead of a regular fighting game. But this is what we got on the NeoGeo, and it's quite a generic game in my opinion. I'm not a fighting game expert, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Really? No.
Now a game that I had to clean up a bunch of times till I got it running, but I had to capture this one. This is a very advanced game for its time, even in terms of NeoGeo. This is Garou Mark of the Wolves. This game is surreal in terms of visuals, of audio. The user interface is incredible, it's beautiful. The game has beautiful cutscenes as well. And the gameplay is considered top-notch by a lot of fighting game fans. Now a game that always caught my attention in the arcades because the animations, the sprites are beautiful.
Super Sidekicks 3!
This is Super Sidekicks 3 actually. And this game has a bizarre mechanic because in order for you to kick the ball, you gotta be in very specific positions. You cannot kick from anywhere. And depending on where you are, instead of kicking, you get a quick time event for the kick. Also, the goalkeepers in this game, they perform miracles. It's surreal how good they are. The game doesn't have a lot of depth in terms of gameplay. It's not as good as, for example, International Superstar Soccer on the Super Nintendo, but it's a very fun game. And here's a very famous franchise. This is the King of Fighters, and I'll start with 94, because then you can see how much it evolved with the years. So let's start with the King of Fighters 94. I'm not very good at the King of Fighters, I'm not good at fighting games, so I got beaten right away. But I could see in terms of visuals and audio that this is a special game. So if we fast forward to the King of Fighters 2002, we can see how much the franchise evolved. ', 2002 is way more beautiful, has more fluid animations when compared to the 94 version. It has also way more characters in it. And now one game that I tested expecting to love, but I didn't really like it. This is Aero Fighters 3. It's a vertical shooter. It didn't feel fun or polished, and the version I have is the one in the MultiCart, and this version has a lot of bugs, so if you're running this game via the MultiCart, you should play the Japanese version, not the American version. A very famous franchise from SNK is Samurai Shodown. And this is Samurai Shodown 4, which a lot of people love and consider the best one in the franchise, along with 2. And now I'm showing you Samurai Shodown 5, which feels very different than the previous games in the franchise, and that's because the game changed hands. It went from one dev team to a different one, so that's why it feels different. And now a game that I often see people recommending for the NeoGeo. This is Sengoku 3. And I tested the game for a while and I found it very repetitive. It doesn't have a lot of variety in the movements, the enemies are quite repetitive, the gameplay is very slow, so in the end it's a beautiful game, but it doesn't hold up in terms of gameplay, at least for me. And this game has a very charming look. This is Spinmaster. It's a 2D platformer with really nice graphics and a very fast-paced gameplay. The initial weapon in the game is a yo-yo, but as we progress in the game we can find several power-ups. And now a game with a very different, very unique concept. This is Crossed Swords. Which honestly reminds me of the arcade version of Punch-Out, but in a medieval setting and with weapons, of course. This game focuses on combat, and I wish it had more depth, because I feel like it would have been better if it had less enemies in quantity and instead focused on developing more each of the opponents, giving them more polish, more movement, more fluidity. Still, it's a fun and very interesting game. Now a very generic beat 'em up. This is Burning Fight. The game has 3 playable characters, nice variety of enemies, colorful scenarios, but in terms of gameplay I found it lacking, it's just average. It's worse than games like Captain Commando and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, for example. Now a game that really caught my attention just with the initial cutscene, which is wonderful. This is Captain Tomaday. It's a vertical shooter in which we control a tomato that punches enemies, and yeah, that sounds crazy, but the game gets even crazier with transformations and power-ups we get. And it's a very fun game. I picked it up to test, and I only stopped playing when I finished it. now a 2D action game, and I'm saying that because visually it looked like a beat 'em up, but it's completely in 2D. This is Eightman. The game is quite frenetic, chaotic, and it's fun too. But it does get a bit repetitive. Now a super tough, super hard horizontal shooter. This is Last Resort. This game is super intense. I personally got stuck right in the first stage. If I insisted, I would have got through it, but I decided not to force my way through it. But eventually I want to try it again and in order to beat it. It's a fun game. It's very addicting, actually. And now a game that has a very bizarre name. This game is Legend of Success, Joel. It starts off like a beat 'em up, but then in the second stage, it's actually a boxing game, and it stays a boxing game. And I didn't find it very appealing, honestly. I wouldn't recommend it. And now, an old school style arcade game. This is Nightmare in the Dark. Super fun. This is a 2D platformer in which we control a little witch and we need to set enemies on fire by shooting them enough fire. They become a fireball that we can throw. And by defeating enemies, we get power-up items, and as we progress in the game, we gotta face bosses in battles that are quite fun, quite engaging. And despite being super simple, this game is fantastic. It's another one that I couldn't stop playing till I beat it, because it's so fun. And this one is really tough. This game is very difficult. Ninja Commando.
Ninja Commando!
It's a vertical scrolling shooter. It features 3 playable characters, and we gotta face hordes and hordes of enemies and bosses. And now a really good shmup. Blazing Star. And this game involves charging the shots to hit the enemies, and there are a lot of types of airships that we can use, and they are unique. Each has its own different shooting style. And the game is brutally difficult. Seriously, check it out. Check this part of the game. There's so much going on. I don't know how not to lose lives in this game. It's so hard, but also it's so good. Another game that is so good that I only stopped playing after beating it. And now a game that I expected to be so good because it looks awesome, but it's awful. This is OverTop. The gameplay is super weak. But at least it looks great and the soundtrack is amazing. And if you're looking for a better racing game on the NeoGeo, this is a good one, Thrash Rally. Visually, not as good as OverTop, but the gameplay is much better. It's a solid one. And still in regards to racing, my favorite Neo Geo racing game is this one.
Drift Out. New technology.
Neo Drift Out. I find this game beautiful and it's very fun. It's another isometric racing game. It features some classic rally cars. The tracks are fun to race in, and they have sections with forks, with shortcuts. So with a few tracks, you gotta memorize how it plays in order to actually beat the game.
Watch out. Right.
This is a timeless game. I think I will always find it fun, and it's another one that I only stopped playing after beating it, which means that I had to go through the final stages several times till I was able to finish the game, because those final stages can get really hard.
Finish.
And now a game that is beloved by many Neo Geo fans.
Shock Troopers.
This is Shock Troopers. It's a very fun shooter. It features 4 playable characters. We can use different vehicles in this game. It features many different scenarios. And everything is very chaotic in the game.
Power stock. Boner. Ammunition.
And visually, it's beautiful and features many cool effects too. Check it out. And also check out my Super Nintendo showcase. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing so you don't miss future episodes, and thank you very, very much for watching.